Number 1 Alabama faced off against number 3 Ohio State on Monday night in the national championship game. The Crimson Tide dominated the Buckeyes, beating them 52-24 as Nick Saban earned his 7th national championship title. Joining me now to break down the game from the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens is Brendan Gulick. Brendan, there were so many incredible performances from Alabama. Devontae Smith outgained the entire Ohio State offense by himself at halftime. Quarterback Mac Jones threw 464 yards and 5 touchdowns. It appeared early on that this offensive attack from Alabama was just too much for Ohio State to keep up with.
Yeah, and I think maybe you have to consider measuring this Alabama offense in historical context, not necessarily just in being the #1 team in the country this year. They were incredible. And while Ohio State has had some vulnerabilities this year on offense, never quite like this. I mean, what Devontae Smith and Mac Jones did in that first half was a whole different level. And it was awfully disappointing that the Buckeyes just didn't quite play their best game tonight. But frankly, Alabama was the decidedly better team. And, it's a tough blow for the Buckeyes, but Alabama was awfully impressive.
Well, speaking of heartbreaking losses, the Buckeyes lost their star running back, Trey Sermon, on the first play of the game. And he was just one of the many injured on Ohio State's roster, to include the quarterback, Justin Fields, who was still recovering from a rib injury he suffered against Clemson. If this was a healthy Buckeyes team, Brendan, do you think the outcome would have been different?
Well, it's hard to really talk about that and know for sure. On a night like tonight, I'm not sure if, there were some NFL players on the field that would have stopped Alabama. That was as clinical an offense as I've honestly seen in person in my life. I mean, they scored on every meaningful possession in the first 3 quarters. And if you score 50 points in the national championship game, it's going to take a heck of an effort to beat you. Now, look, it was awfully disappointing that Trey Sermon is unfortunately, comes out after one play and never really had a chance to showcase himself in the biggest game of the year. The issue with Justin Fields' ribs, did it bother him? I'm sure it wasn't comfortable, but he played okay. To me, more disappointing that the Buckeyes just weren't at full strength anyways. Missing Tyreek Smith, missing Tommy Togiai in the defensive line, and then Jaron Cage, who was his replacement, gets hurt. That was really frustrating against the best offensive line in the country that Alabama's got. And look, Wyatt Davis has had a couple of games this year where he's had to be helped out of the game with a knee injury. And tonight it happened for the 3rd time in the last 4 games. Considering he opted out before the season and then opted back in, I kind of expect that Wyatt Davis's career at Ohio State is probably done. And I'm sure that's not the way he wanted to end his time here either. So just a frustrating night. But I guess the direct answer to your question of, could the outcome have been different? I suppose it could have been, but boy, Alabama was pretty darn good tonight. I'm not sure anybody was going to beat them this evening.
I'm going to have to agree with you there. Pretty incredible performance from the Crimson Tide. Alabama, the national championship title goes home with them tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, Brendan. Really appreciate it.